One thing people like to do is identify with various groups. I belong to this particular social club or this particular social class, or I belong to this culture or that culture, or I'm an American. Even prior to the Civil War, people didn't say I'm an American, they said I'm a Virginian, I'm a Georgian, I'm a Texan. We like to have groups that we belong to. And in the first reading today, God is collecting his people, Israel, into a group. He's saying, you are a people peculiarly my own. And what makes them peculiar? They have a relationship with the one true God, which is something the other countries and pagan cultures could not claim. Even among their false pagan gods, they did not have a relationship and a covenant with them. Here we have the one true God, and God has a relationship with Israel, with his law, with the worship prescriptions. The people are coming out of the desert and being instructed by Moses in his final words that they have an identity as a group. Even though there are 12 different tribes, plus the Levites, they come together as one people under that covenant with God. In the same way, Jesus is saying to his own disciples, you are a group. There is something that makes you stand out. And what is that? Well, he gives a long list of it, but in today's gospel, he makes a distinction. If you love only those who love you back, that's what the pagans do. How do you stand out if you do that? In other places he says, if you only lend to those who will pay you back, that's what the pagans do. How do you stand out if that's what you do? And so he gathers them into a very distinct group of people that stand out even as they blend in. That this group holds a relationship with Christ, a covenant relationship sealed in his blood, in which we live as people who are saved. We live as people of the resurrection. We live as people of salvation. And there are certain things we don't do. And there are certain things we do because we belong to this particular group. One might say, well, this isn't the Mexican way, or this is the Filipino way, or this is the Vietnamese way, or that's not the American way. But how often do we say, this is the Catholic way? This is the Christian way, or this is not the Catholic way, or this is not the Christian way. How often is that prioritized in our lives, in which we identify first and foremost with a group that is a people of faith, as distinct from a culture or a nationality? And yet during the season of Lent, we're called to identify with this group that is our community of faith. Every now and again, I'll run into someone who says to me, well, Father, I don't abstain from meat on Fridays because I don't get anything out of it. To which my response is, for lack of a better way of putting it, when all is said and done, it's not about you. It's about the community of faith, and this is something we do together during the season of Lent. Fasting is something we do together on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. And there are those who continue the weekly abstinence of meat on Friday because, even though we no longer have the obligation to do so, this is what Catholics do. And we belong to the Catholic faith. This is the group that we belong to. And yes, we are gathered as an exclusive group, not an elite club, but a group that has embraced Christ and his salvation, and we live our lives accordingly. How often do we hear people say, well, the church needs to change this teaching or that teaching because the majority of people don't follow that particular mindset, viewpoint, value, or rule. God would say in the book of Deuteronomy, but you are a people that is peculiar. You don't do what other people do, even if that other people is the majority. Jesus would say, well, so what? That's what the pagans do, but you do something different because you are peculiar. And so we really shouldn't be moved when we hear people say the church needs to get with the times. The church needs to change a certain teaching and get with this value rather than the values that are too old-fashioned or too medieval. And our response is very simple. Well, that's what the pagans do. We are a people who are peculiar. We are a people who belong to God. We are a people who've been saved by Christ, and we exercise that peculiarity during the season of Lent, if not all throughout the year. But I'll tell you, if we can't do it during the season of Lent, we won't be able to do it all throughout the year. So let us, during the season of Lent, in addition to our individual observances, which we are still called to engage in, that we still engage in actions that bind us as a community, starting with the worship that we engage in as a community of faith, which we are supposed to do all throughout the course of the year. But especially during the disciplines that we do together, fasting and abstinence, not for their own sake, not because they mean anything to us, but because they bind us as a community so that we can identify with one another, grow stronger as a community of faith, so that we can go forth from this season of Lent and all throughout the year, living the values and the standards that God has given us as a people who are peculiar, are a people that are His own.